Welcome to our next module. In this module, we'll be reviewing the Declaration of Independence. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First of all, the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson. At the time, the writing of the Declaration was considered a minor task. It wasn't really given the significance that we think of it today. As a matter of fact, Adams was given the opportunity to write it instead of Jefferson. But at the time, Adams, he was a little higher in the pecking order, and a lot of the political allies thought that Adams had more important things to do than to draft this document. The Declaration was heavily influenced by Locke. You can see it in there. And as a quick side note, I remember when I took this class years and years ago, the instructor said, had Jefferson turned the Declaration of Independence in as an assignment, he would have flunked him for the course for plagiarism. So anyway, the Declaration, again, was heavily influenced by Locke and Locke's philosophy. The general purposes, some general purposes really, one, just to formally declare independence. That's easy enough. But also it was to explain the reasons why. And probably most importantly was to appeal to France. Britain and France, let's just say they weren't on good speaking terms at the time. And really, there's an old adage, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. Now, as you remember from a previous module, the colonies were a captive audience economically to Britain. And to appeal to France, they're trying to get some sort of lifeline established with that independence. Okay? Now, when we jump into the Declaration, and I could say forgive me, but forgive Jefferson. I always joke around. They loved to run on sentences back in the day. But what I really want to do is just review some of the text, okay, and go through and make some comments here and there. So with this first part of the Declaration of Independence, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So Jefferson here is just opening comments. We need to explain why we are breaking from Britain. And you see here laws of nature and of nature's God. We see at least here a general reflection of Lockean philosophy. Okay, moving. This next section, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A couple comments about this. First of all, we hold these truths to be self-evident. They weren't necessarily self-evident universally back when the Declaration was drafted, nor is it today. We've touched on that in a couple of the previous modules. Second, that all men are created equal. This is something that we hold a much more universal view and much more universal reading of that phrase than was at the time of this drafting. And again, you're hearing unalienable rights. That's another reference to Lockean philosophy. The last piece of this, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Over the years, when I've taught this class, I get to this portion of lecture material, I'll say life, liberty, and leading question. And this is when I talk about the basis of democracy. And I believe I mentioned this in a previous module as well. But I always wait for pursuit of happiness. Now, from the Lockean perspective, it was property. But I just want to make reference back to that, where this is one of those examples that Jefferson really took a lot from Locke in the drafting of the Declaration. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Again, we're seeing the Lockean influence. But what Jefferson is really getting at here is something we've been talking about all along: popular sovereignty. Where does the power ultimately come from? Where does it emanate from? And for Jefferson in the writing of this, it comes from the people, from the governed. All right? Next, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This is also a Lockean influence. For Locke, if government does not serve the purpose of the people, to support natural rights, natural law, it is the right of the people to cast off that government and secure a new one. That is what Jefferson is referring to here as well. And now let's look at this next phrase. I've always found this phrase to be somewhat interesting. So let's just read this. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. I find this very interesting. I think most of us have some experience with this. How many times in your life have you had one of those things where you try to make something work, and then finally you say, this is just not going to happen? I always joke around in my classes that when way back in the day, that I had a reputation of dating people too long, and typically after I would break up with someone, all my friends would say, "Man, we thought you would break up with her months ago or weeks ago." And so typically what Jefferson is speaking to is kind of the same thing here, that we tend to stay with things longer than we should. So by the time we get to that point of making this break, it really should have been done long before. That this isn't something that's done overnight, it's really done for quick and hasty reasons. It's really a long time in the making. All right, that's really what Jefferson is explaining here. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Now, there is a lot more to the Declaration of Independence. This is where I usually stop when I review it. But I probably could have stopped at the prior phrase, but I'd like to point this out. When Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, the first draft, when he came back with it, they said, "Oh, no, go back and tone it down a little bit." It was a little bit over the top. But even in this phrase, you see that Jefferson did take a little license here. If you get a wild hair and actually want to major in political science and you continue to study, despotism is a very particular kind of government. It's usually found in very environmentally harsh areas, but really the daily survival of the population is of utmost concern. So when he is painting the picture of despotism for the colonies, that probably is a little bit of a stretch there. All right. Now, the last thing here, and this is just the first piece of the Declaration, just the date and just the open salutation, so to speak. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Now, do you see there? I have United, kind of bolded, shaded in there. United is not capitalized. Well, let me tell you, that is not a typo. I will say this: if you ever see a copy of the Declaration of Independence where United is capitalized, that's the typo. This is the first time we will address this in these modules. But it's very, very important for us to understand how each of the colonies and the or now new states, view themselves. United is just a descriptor here. It's not a part of the name. So these newly independent states view themselves as just that, independent sovereign nations. So what we know today as the 50 states coming together under one umbrella, and the states pretty much handle more local government issues, at this time each state considered itself sovereign. Remember from a previous module we talked about sovereignty as a fundamental foundational term? Well, we're seeing that again here. So with this, you had the sovereign state of North Carolina, the sovereign state of Virginia, the sovereign state of Massachusetts, and so on. They were just coming together collectively to work together. All right, and we'll pick this up again in the next module. But I just want to point that out because this is not something that we tend to peel back and look at. We normally look at it more through the lens of how we think of it today. But it's very important that we remember this in the coming modules to help explain why the states did what they did in the early part of our American experience, as the political scientists like to say. And with that, that's the end of this module. Again, go back and review it, pause, restart as needed, and we will pick it up with the next module.